Hello. Quick update. Don't know what all I did since the last video. I don't know if I showed you that. Got those plugged. And then I did wrap the bottom on that side. I think that might have been in, or it was certainly the last thing I did yesterday. All day today. I mean, I've been in and out of meetings and stuff, but all day today I've been working on this radiator. I pulled the fan out and then just taped off the shroud is still on it. This is the shroud, that 3/4 of an inch. But we can see that I've got, come on, a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch to the top pulley, which is the farthest protruding thing. Now I had to space that top pulley 3/8 of an inch forward. So if we call that, let's figure out what that is. Let's just find out, in the vast world of tape measures. This is like diminishing returns, but I don't know if I'll even get in there. Let's see what we can figure out here. So on that top bolt, we'll call that not 3/4. Let's just call it a 1/2. I can push the radiator forward. Not a 1/2, but I can push it to this edge. I can push it to this edge. We'll call that 3/8. Let's say 7/8 to a 1/2 of an inch. Just this flange is an inch and a, what is that? An inch and 3/8, inch and a quarter. Just that flange is inch and a quarter, but of course she sticks out. If I'm perpendicular, let's say 2.5 inches. There's no way in God's green earth that I'm going to get that out of there. I can take the shroud off, which is really quite a nice shroud, but I think I'm going to go with a pusher. And that's what I've been monkeying around with, was eking it back so that I can get the full, here I can get an inch, realistically an inch and a quarter for that come on, grill piece. When I put the grill in. And that's what we had here, without any stick out. So when I fab the grill, I'm gonna have to fab it so that I can get that shape out of it. At the top, even with a straight run, I'm at 2.5 right there. That's with it just going straight down, but I'll have to do something decorative with that. I got to pull it just a little bit. This isn't really tight or anything, but to get it to touch this, I'm touching on the other side. I'm touching on the back. The whole day has been spent just simply, there's a 2x4 in there just to make sure it stays at that distance, because there's a little upward motion because it's flipping fiberglass. But as these came off and went on, and came off and went on, and came off and went on today, I don't know, many times today, because I had to put the radiator and take the grill off. Then I took the fenders off. But as I was doing it, I was noticing some things. When you're bolting this together, I was noticing, hey, it's easier to bolt together if I torque this one up and torque this one up. And pretty soon, well, that's because it wants to be there. Now it's fiberglass, And this one definitely is dog-legged up here. I pat them on the floor, put them together. Probably sat this way, you know, for however long it sat in inventory, and then it basically just eventually memory in the fiberglass. But the more I'm working on it, the more relaxed things are getting. So my distance from the cowl, my brackets down here, that's all adjusted. And to me, this distance, particularly from where the sheet metal hood will go on to that point right there, must be the same on both sides. My hood pieces must be the same length. That's why these are in. And it's for symmetry, you know, I don't want to have any problems that way. So I got it all set in that way. And because I've got the mounts fabricated up, and because I built them as mirror images, I know that the variation then winds up being in the fenders themselves. So, and there is variation. And, you know, that's the blues of working with fiberglass. I no longer measure up to the bottom. I might have gone over this. I measure up to that line, because these were just trimmed, and they're not the same on both sides. Took me a little while to realize that. As I'm putting my level across here, I just noticed today, this is all sanded, finished sanded up here, and then not. It's got mold flashing, and that's sticking up 3/16, you know, upwards of 1/4 of an inch on this side. And here I'm sitting here trying to define, you know, where my sheet metal is going to sit. And this bead will be here. It'll be a little below the bead, but I got basically a lot of things to kind of consider. But what I do know now is everything needed to come up a little bit for the radiator to fit inside of the grill shell. And at this point, it's fully in the grill shell. And it's not tight. I got a clamp right there holding, you know, clamp to that, holding it in. But it's, you know, it's up, basically up against somewhere in this neighborhood. And I had to come up a little bit with the front end. Of course, I can adjust the suspension. I'm actually all the way down right now. I don't have all the weight on it, but I am all the way down on the springs. They're adjustable shocks. But what I need to do now is finish mounting the radiator. It's got the bottom support, the top support that will hold the radiator up, as well as the grill shell. Don't have a clue on how exactly I'm going to do that yet. I'm still dreaming about that. I got it centered. The grill shell is centered from there to the line. I'm going to lose this to the line, center line on the windshield and cowl. And now I'm just basically going back and forth and doing each bolt hole, tap, so on and so forth. So the bottom radiator, that platform to hold the radiator on the bottom, is just friction fit between the frame rails. And I got to get in, and that'll have to bolt on, and it'll have to have a hole in it, because one of the through holes for the that piece is covered up by that piece for the mounts for these upper brackets. And to make, so I'll have to plunge through that, or try to get into the holes that I have in there. There are 1.5 inch holes. Try to get in there with my welder, and either put weld nuts on or put or weld the heads on. But I don't know yet. Don't know yet. If I have access, then I can obviously blow a couple of heavy tacks in there, and that'll solve that. But that's kind of where I'm at. It's just a lot of, I wouldn't call it frustration, a lot of challenges. And so I'm heading out to SEMA in 2 days. Today's Friday, and this is all just mocked up. I don't want anybody else from the family having a party on it. The other thing I did was I finished relieving these out now, and that's where the apron, it'll taper back from there. I didn't cut that because that's the remnants of the apron that's still on there, and I will glass out to there to get that space. So I know I bounce back and forth. That's kind of how my mind works, but this is where we're at today. This is where we're at today. And it's a thinking day. That's for sure. Well, got her blown apart. You can have a quick peek on the wings. Pulled these off. Ran some 3/4 grade 8s through. And then got inside that little hole. Cranked the welder up. See that? And laid a bead in there. Now, if you remember from many videos ago, I brushed epoxy on that frame, and that stuff was thick. Not 1/4, but more than 1/8. I took a little, I just dug and dug and dug. And I'm going to look in the garbage here. Yeah, I can't find it. You know how those roll-locks come? A roll-lock disc? Well, I had the old style where you threaded it onto it had a 5/16 post, and you threaded it onto a drill, and it already had the sandpaper on it, and you would buy a 1/4 drive or 5/16. In this case, it was 1/4 drive, and it had a 5/16 thread and a lock nut on it, and for wood sanding and stuff like that. Well, this one still had 36 grit on it, and I cut that disc to fit inside here with a tin snip. Just cut the rubber, and then I got in there and with a drill. I didn't want high speed. With a drill, and I just peeled away all that epoxy until I got bare metal. Then just, of course, ran the bolt in, put a grade 8 washer on, right, in a nut. Tightened it down, not tight, but more than finger tight, and then hit her. Now there's 4 holes. There's that hole. And then there's a hole behind this mount, hole here, and a hole behind there for access, because that was the original plan. And I'm covering that hole up with the radiator mount, and I considered drilling the hole in it. But then you start thinking about if you ever need to service it or anything of that nature, you have to pull the radiator out, pull the wing off, pull that fender bracket off. No, that's way, way, way too much work. So at this point, then I came in and welded them, and so now that bracket, you can assemble it from the outside. We got studs. So at this point now, I'm making the radiator mount. Okay, I talked a little bit about this earlier. I got the rack power steering line. I wanted to get this as low as possible. I tapped on it a little bit, then I got a little nervous about tapping on that because I didn't want to kink it, and I didn't kink it. It's all good. But you can see that I moved it a little bit, and that was getting frustrating. So I stopped, and then I had to get clearance here to get around the adjustment, and then around the power steering pump hose, and then the supply hose, and then the lines, clear the lines. The upper power steering hose comes in across the top of this bracket. It sits there, and this sits to the outside. of the fender. The fender comes in inside of this. So now what I did is I drilled, I don't know, 1/8 inch or maybe a little bigger, whatever the drill bit was that was that size. And I put 3 holes in it because that little box is the location of the hole behind it. All this is just my markings to make sure that I get this put in the right spot. So now I'm in, and I'm going to drill this. And if you remember, this end piece, this is 3/16. This is all 11 gauge. This is 3/16. So I'm going to run 3 1/4 inch screws in each side, and tap this. Tap this. I think that'll be plenty of thread and plenty of beef. 3 1/4 inch screws on each side supporting this will be plenty. This is a piece of 12 gauge, okay, that I bent in the brake. And then I welded a piece of 16 gauge square tubing to it. And that square tubing ends, you can see my stitches on the back side, my stitches on the front side. And I'm not going to finish this out anything beautiful. I'm just cleaning off the high spots, making it look decent. And then what I'll do is I'll locate where the radiator sits, drill the holes. You can see this is a freaking monster. But I've got some clearance under here. There's a shadow line of the edge of the radiator. In any event, then I will tack, or I will spot weld nuts on the bottom side of this so you can thread it from the top and bolt it in. The flanges, you know, there is no specific, this radiator fits tight. I wish I could get one that was 1 inch shorter, but I could not. I could, but then I was getting a lot smaller radiator in width and everything else. And I gotta cool this beast. So it fits in the shell. I measured before I ordered it, but I had to just trim the flanges back. The wings are 5/8 of an inch long now on each side of flat surface area. And then I'll run 1/4 inch bolts down. Let me get this zoom back out, down through here into those nuts. So all's good. She sits flat. She's, you know, I don't really have to show you, but it sits perfectly flat. It doesn't touch anything. I'm too deep. Okay. It doesn't touch anything. And it'll go, well, I'm past the radiator now. It would over here, but I'm past the radiator. So there's where I'm at. Gonna get this fabbed in. I made all those adjustments yesterday. I did lengthen the slots on those because I was just getting too close to the top of the bottom of the slot, but in the raise, and I want all of the adjustability necessary. If I need to go to a 3rd hole in that, I don't think I need to because I'm midway up the frame on the studs. Well, now I got a bad view, but there they are. I'm midway up the frame. So I don't think I'm going to have any problems with that. But if I need to, I can certainly put a 3rd one in. Weld nut? No, please no. I would probably maybe do a flange off the top or something and grab it because that's got a significant straight area on it. So we got it. These look like they're tipping down just a little bit. And I, you know, relative to the body, I think they do. But you got to remember, I bolted those to the bottom of the fender, and they're bonded onto the fender, and however they wound up bonding is how those positions. So remember, I had the fender on, mocked up, held to where it needed to be, and then introduced the bracket to the mount and tacked it on. So I was putting the fender where it needs to be relative to the frame. based on however thick the fiberglass was, whether there was thick spots or thin spots, and whatever angle that wound up being on. But the fender goes on flat. This curve on the inside, the outside curve is fine. The inside curve wings up a little bit on this fender, and you know, that's fiberglass. But I can very easily, and I think yesterday you saw I had that block of wood in there. I just cut that notch to fit the other side, because the other side stayed, and stuck it in this side. And all the other measurement points, the distance, everything else, calculated, so the result is the process of elimination got me to that. So anyway, we'll continue on the radiator mount now. And of course, to get, I'm not just going to arbitrarily, I should have done more marks, but the thing is you can't get in there with the fenders. So what I'll do is I'll drill the holes on the radiator, and even if I need to put a magic marker on a stick, I'll get down there and identify where those holes need to be, but I'll have to assemble it, of course, and disassemble it. But I'm actually getting pretty doggone good at that by this point. So learning a lot about that movement of that fiberglass and where to find the happy zone. So you saw yesterday that it all sat in I could get it to position in the right spot with minimum stress and minimum pull. So I had a strap on here. It wasn't tight, but just to get a little bit of twist out of it. And again, as I'm going through this, I thought to myself, this fender needs to go back, this fender needs to go back. But the opening relative to the wheel, the dimensions off the firewall, the dimension from the firewall to the front of the fender, I mean, everything was dialed in. So the result again is you're back to where's the problem, and the problem is in the fender. So it wasn't a lot of pull, but of course when I build that top brace, that'll hold everything in. So here we go. Okay, drilled, tapped, and bolted. I just cleaned it up with a scuff pad too, and I used hardened washers, grade 8 washers, and these are all grade 2 bolts. These are all just a bags of cheap bolts, and that's what I'm using for the fenders and everything else to mock everything up. The thing is you can get a bunch of cheap bolts for mock-up, but when it comes to cinching down, then I'll get grade 5 bolts. I have learned over the years that using the finish hardware, a lot of times you just don't like the results in the end because you've rounded them, or you've tightened them or rounded them off or done whatever. If I did break a grade 2 bolt in the mock-up because of over tightening, if I broke it off, you can quickly drill out a grade 2 bolt. So just one of those, I don't know, tech tips, if you want to call it that I've learned over the years, that does get frustrating. Now, those are grade 8 bolts. I'm sorry, grade 8 bolts that I ran through and welded. And yeah, sometimes welding takes a little bit of the temper out. But what options did I have? And I will reuse a good grade 8 bolt also, if the threads are good, and it isn't stretched. The application was something that wasn't, relative to the engine block or something that was torqued. I will use grade 8 bolts, reuse grade 8 bolts. So, okay, that's this step. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is 12 gauge attached to 16 gauge. I considered tapping through and just using the threads. You can see I'm going to grade 5 bolt now. But instead I chose I thought about those, and then I remembered I had a bunch of weld nuts. So those are those two. There's that one. I grabbed it as deep as I could go, which is about halfway. You can see. I got past the hole. And this one, try to get some light on him. He's welded. Actually, he's welded better than all the rest because I drilled through and through. That's that hole. And then I actually just cut a piece out and then welded it back in. So that's the bottom rad mount. Ready to go back in. Fortunately, I can do that with the just the grill off. But he's a hokey little deal. So he sits in. He sets in. He sets in tough and difficult. There. Right there. Right there, and the same thing on the other side. So I'll bolt him in and stick the radiator on, and yay! I think we'll go from there. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Just got back from the SEMA show yesterday, and just jumping back into it. So I pulled got back, a wonderful show. First off, wonderful show. If you want to see how well it went, look at the roughly 2 million views out on the internet. Excuse me, on YouTube and elsewhere. But it was good. It was refreshing. It was the opportunity to learn techniques and talents that are out in the industry. One of the things that I noted, I guess, is that there was I think I saw one Dodge in the 20s, early 30s or 20s over there. I did see a few of the Hemis, first gen Hemis, that was kind of cool too. And interestingly looked at their builds, and in that, from what I saw, everybody was using the 392 heads with the water ports on the front and that kind of a thing. Didn't see a single one that was a custom fuel injection system. In fact, a lot of what is there, even the top builders are using, off the shelf, second and third tier vendors to them, and standardizing, the steering columns, the intake systems, the fuel injection systems, and then of course the broad, majestic and broad use of the LS motor or the current Hemi or the Coyote. And of course I'm detracting from that theme altogether, and because I'm unique and different. Anyway, just who I am. Spent a lot of time thinking about a lot of things, and one of them was how tight. I'm going to go back. How tight everything is. I saw stuff there that was really amazing. There was a steering system there. I don't want to go tighter than 37.5 or the specification to the universal joints. I saw a joint, a steering, a custom build, very nice, very beautiful build. Saw several of them, but in one case where that angle was greater than 45 degrees. And when stuff like that exists. Number one, you may be able to turn the steering wheel, but you're certainly going to feel the acceleration, deceleration, or the hard spots, we'll call it, the hard spots of the universal joint bind that occurs when you exceed the limitations of it. The build was beautiful, but that in real life, that kind of stuff doesn't work. This car is being built to drive, of course, so I'm not powder coating the frame, that kind of stuff. I'm coating everything, but I'm not doing it to avoid a scratch when I put a jack under it, you know. I'm not in that kind of a world. Maybe I should say yet, so I can redact any comments that are brought to me in the future for what I've done in the past. So, but everything that I've built, I drive. Even that Izetta sitting up there, I built that in '96. Even that guy, I got about 6,000 miles on that guy. I drove it to work every day. 98, 99. Got teased, you know, guys would come in with a crushed up Coke can and say, oops, I accidentally hit your car and stuff like that. That was fun period. And that hasn't been restored since then. That's the condition it was in 1996. And so what am I doing? Why am I saying all this? Yeah, I like driving what I build. But I looked at a lot of stuff, and of course, everything out in the industry that is mass produced, unless you custom build, is built for the Fords. When you get pre 36, say, pre 40, this radiator is for a 32 series type Ford build, and the dimensions fit the shell, but I'm hitting up here, and you guys know what I did in terms of trying to get clearance when I made the mount. You know, I'm not. This is below, trying to keep everything below. I hogged this out to get that 90 thousandths, you know, so that I could get it in and still clear the power steering rack. Yeah, I could take the rack apart, clock that. Can't do a lot with that, you know, and keep fighting and fighting and fighting. But when I got back, and after spending days thinking about this, I decided what I'm going to do is get that clearance in the lower shell as much as I can. Now this has a transcooler. I probed it with a video scope or a cylinder scope or block scope, whatever you want to call it. Happen to have one, and I see that I have clearance down here. I needed water to flow down here, obviously, so the cooler can do the cooling. And I can't define that, and I did everything that I could to get in here and look. And I can't define precisely what that is. So I cut here, there, and here, and I'm going to flip it over and cut the other side. And what I'm basically going to do is clean up this edge, get a dimension. I did make a straight line dimension with a fine line. Just before I cut it off, and that would be where I want to go with it. It's just basically a 1/2 inch change. The radiator would drop a 1/2 inch. I counted for the material thickness here, so, or my perception of it. It turns out as I cut it, I said, geez, it feels thin, but judging from the cut, it appears to be 1/8 inch aluminum. It appears to be this material right here. So, in any event, that's what I'm doing. Then I flip it over, cut the other side off, get in there and see how far I can go. Of course, I don't want to make contact with the cooler, but I want to get as far that way as I can. And at that point, then I know I have all the clearance in the world. I know that, I have some play in what I want to do based on my hood to get that tilted back or forward. But, that aesthetic is important to me too. How that looks is important to me too. But I got a little bit of, play in there. But before I go into doing all the top stuff, I want to make sure that everything, as I go through the steps, that I have the appropriate clearance and I'm not going to cause any problems down the road. So this is the phase that I'm at. All right, more later. Okay, let's take a look at the progress so far. So basically I got in. This happens to be a 4-row radiator. Maybe, you know, but they're only 5/8 rolls. And nice thing is it's aluminum, so I mean I definitely have some cooling capacity, which is a good thing. But cut it off. You can see that cut was just right up to the weld of the ring holding the tube. And I don't at any point in time even come, you know, within a 1/4 of an inch or so of the tube. Okay? Oh, there, holding it. It's kind of hard to use two hands without dropping the phone. Anyway, so that's good. So it'll have water flow underneath it. We won't have any pressure up against the bottom, that kind of stuff that may cause cracks. This is the material that I cut out. Doesn't look like a 1/2 of an inch, but if you add the saw blade or the cutoff wheel width to it, you'll achieve a 1/2 of an inch. Marked fine line on it. Excuse me. Marked a fine line on it. Cut it. Kept the line on the material, then came back and cleaned it up. Now in this case, the fill tube, I had to put a small cut, relief cut in the fill tube. Then I just went and found a socket that would fit inside of this. I got pretty close, held the socket up against this side while I took a body. It's just aluminum, but took a body hammer and tapped on here. You could see from the shadow line, you know, that I held the socket down here, but there's a little deformation above there. It looks, you know, you can't really feel it per se, but you can see that it just tapers in. Then I flushed that out with the radiator surface. Now the radiator, you know, and I cross-checked, fits in, and it is just not even an 1/8 of an inch or so beyond, you know, it's past that edge a little bit. So I know that if I can get past that it drops off after the inside edge, that so long as all of this drop below this edge is behind this edge, that in fact I can get it in. So that's good news. So I took the original that I cut off, and I didn't like, you know, the way the radiator came, this just had ears welded on to the tank. But, you know, and that would be the last step that they do. But in looking at this piles up, this weld piles up on this side, and I try to tap it down with a hammer, but they just didn't get the bracket on perfectly flat with the bottom, and where this one is substantially more flat with the bottom. This one is not. So I just opted, I looked around. This is all 1/8 inch aluminum. Everything here is 1/8 inch. And I happen to have a piece of 1/8 inch. So what I did was I just basically sheared off a piece, nipped this edge out, copied the profile. I did, however, you see how close that is to the edge? I did add some material to each end. After mounting this all up, and I could see that I could go a little bit farther and not cause problems. So I went ahead and I did that. Sheared that off, identified side one, side two, and that this is the outside. So that because of the hole spacing on the driver's side and the notch to clear the power steering assembly. So if I flip this over and toss it in, we can see that I'm not hitting this lower power steering line I don't have any interference there. I'm just trying to sight the holes. We can see that I'm overhanging there. I'm overhanging. Well, it's closer to 1/4 of an inch than 1/8 of an inch. But I'm overhanging, and this would be where my lower hose would attach. So it wound up working out really good. So I stamped that out, you know, pretty easy. All right, I sheared it out, and then this will then get welded on approximately right there, and just weld it across. So not a huge project, but it's going to provide huge opportunity, because a 1/2 of an inch, when you're starting to talk about this radius, dropping that down a 1/2 of an inch is going to give me a lot of flexibility to keep it away from hitting that grill. So was a challenge, you know, thinking about what to do, but that is the solution in this case. So this is ready for, I'll finish cleaning the aluminum, both pieces, and get it ready for weld up and go from there. Thanks, guys. All right, guys. Today's the day that I try to do some other things. What I'm trying to do here is make a cruise control system. Okay? So this will go in, oops, like that, under the steering wheel. And it'll attach something like that. Okay, I'm just holding it, but, and then I want buttons in this side and this side. Okay, so I took some 12 gauge, sandwiched it, cut it, ground it, drilled the holes, that kind of thing, and then I broke it to this angle. Okay, 199 degrees, 99 degrees. Okay, now they're sandwiched together, and there is going to be a little bit of space here because I'll need a wiring channel in there. So the cruise control on a Dodge Dakota, where the PCN, or where the steering wheel came from, consists of an on-off switch. All three are momentary. And this one you push, this one is a flush mount. So you push it, you can't accidentally turn it on or off. You push it, and that little power button there will light up blue. So he's got 4 pins, 1 for the momentary switch, or 2 rather for the momentary switch, and 2 for the blue LED. The other 2 switches are the same, and they're raised. You can see they're raised, so you can feel them. So in the array, I'm going to try to get the Resume Excel on the top and the Set Coast on the bottom, and then this guy over to the side. I took the factory cruise control switch module, okay, and it had a 3-wire pinout. Where the pins were, then I soldered in. There's only 3 pins. I soldered in the barrels for those 3 pins. I got them taped to the side. And then on the front, I got the LED wiring. I wanted 2 colors because I wanted to know where my positive and my ground was for the LED. These are, of course, polarity, sensitive to polarity. And then I grabbed some garage door opener wire, and I tied each of the 3 momentary switches that were on. I removed those and then installed that wiring. So what I'm going to do is attempt to mount this in here between the 2, but in this area. There'll be a space between here, undetermined at this point in time, but maybe 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 of an inch, and then enough room then to feed the wiring up to each of the switches. That's the game that I'm going to try to play. I might succeed or I might fail, but so far the soldering has been a monster. I lightened up the wire gauge. I originally started with a heavier wire gauge and then I lightened it up and then it went really smooth. They're all momentary switches. You know, you're not going to heat the circuits up, you're just turning them on. The LED, it does happen to be a little heavier gauge. It's 12 volt LED. But chasing the wiring diagram and looking at what I can accomplish through this is where I'm headed. Might fail, don't know. Worth a try. See you later. Okay, real quick. I was able to identify, see that it's a 3/8 nut in there. These are all 1/4 inch bolts. So I'm establishing a spacer. And that I'll have to build, of course. But, which is really no big deal because it's going to be either attached to this side or to the bottom side. So what I'm basically doing, that's holding it all together. And I'm going to perimeter weld all of this 18 gauge, still hot. I'll have to do some splices, but I'll get them, you know, I'm going to get them on the narrow side so they're small and hidden. But I'll get it tacked welded rather, all the way around on the top. Then when you disassemble it, it will go onto the outside. It'll fit over the outside of that. So it is actually 2 pieces so that you can lay everything in. You can see I drilled the holes for the switches. They are to the correct size. I'll chase them with a step bit if necessary, if the switches don't fit, but they fit perfectly right now. Anyway, so just going around the perimeter right now for the top hat piece. All right, guys, got her in the car. Steering wheel controls. Hub. All wired in, plugged in together. I'll hop in the car and see it from the driver's point of view. It's kind of hard because I don't have a seat bolted in here, but I'm sitting about right here, cruising on the road. Cruise on. What is it? Excel plus, yeah, accelerate, and decelerate. Resume. This is resume. Resume. You know, kill it. I did consider, you know, because of these are just polished, I could make little chrome buttons with the words on them, but I don't know. It's kind of intuitive, I guess. Pretty well standardized. Turns with the steering wheel. Looks cool. Looks cool. I'm proud of it. Got all the wiring done. Now, of course, I'll chase down and well, I've got that all soldered in, but I don't have these tight. I just have the, you know, cinched down a little bit, because of course I got this side to do and all that. It starts to pack it in here pretty good. It's not bad. The only issue that I had is that I should figure out a way to fasten this to this so that I'm only putting the steering wheel on, because now I'm putting an entire sandwich together, you know. So you got to kind of get those wires in there, and it's a bit of a monster to put together, but I can deal with that later. I'm not worried about that right at the moment. Thanks, guys.